And just a couple of reminders that this is our third quarter meeting, and it's expected to run from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. And if possible, we'd love to see faces on today's meeting, so feel free to share your video, but please mute the audio unless you're speaking to avoid that background noise. Now, our meeting generally does start with Dr. Glass doing our welcome and our opening. However, we do have a conflict with the Student Advisory Council is meeting today. So Dr. Glass is working with the students at the start of their meeting, and he's going to be joining us at the end of our meeting, so around 11:30 or so. And that same conflict, unfortunately, was referenced by Dr. Woods Tucker as well. So if we have to move things around a bit in the agenda, please allow us to do that, and hopefully it won't cause too much disruption, but we just have to accommodate the schedules, recognizing that we have two very important meetings going on today. So I will do the welcome. Welcome to everyone. Glad you were able to attend. And the first thing that we need to engage in is our roll call. So TAC members, if you could, as you look at the slide here, and you'll see the bullets there on the right, it starts with Stephanie Beeson. I'm just going to ask you to follow the order of that bulleted list and unmute your microphone and enable your camera to introduce yourself. So just name and what county or what school district, what school district that you're representing. So we'll start first off with Stephanie. All right, and Chandra.
Good morning. This is Chanda Britt at Kentucky School for the Deaf.
Thank you. Miles.
Good morning. I'm Miles Johnson. I'm the art teacher at Warner Elementary in Jessamine County.
Thank you. Lainey.
Lainey Neal, Montgomery County Schools.
Thank you. Garris. Carrie. John.
Morning, I'm John Whipples, 8th grade social studies teacher, Breckenridge County.
Thank you. Quentin, he had emailed me that he wouldn't be here, but just double checking. Quentin Johnson. Jennifer. Taylor.
Taylor Sullivan, Boone County Schools.
Thank you. Abigail. Alan. Nora. I see Nora, but it looks like you're muted, Nora. Okay, she's here. We'll get that figured out. Beverly.
Beverly Rutledge, Carter County Schools.
Thank you. Tiffany. Kim.
Kim Saylor, Middlesboro Independent.
Thank you. Brianna.
Hi, Brianna Shelby, Jefferson County.
Thank you. And Angela.
Hi, Angie Bevan. I teach 5th grade for the Franklin County School System.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now that we have our roll call completed, just want to remind the TAC members to use the digital sign-in. And on this slide deck, these are all embedded live links. So if you have trouble accessing, you can use the direct link here, but select today's date and then sign in digitally, March 23rd, 2021. And that'll be our written confirmation of attendance. That takes us to item 3 on the agenda, approving the summary minutes, and that is from our December the 10th, 2020 meeting. And you'll notice there where it says click here, there's the direct link to the TAC page on KDE's website. And then also this link was sent in the meeting invite. So just as soon as we have someone ready to review those summary minutes for accuracy, we will take a motion to accept and just ask you to unmute and announce your name and your motion, and then we'll need a second, wherein someone unmutes, announces the name, and provides a second. And once that's completed, if everyone's in favor, just type approve in the chat feature. Okay, and I see Miles has his hand raised. Miles, feel free to unmute.
Nope, I'm good. That was just hitting the wrong button. Sorry about that.
Okay, all right. I thought you were wanting to make that motion.
This is Chanda Britt. I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Chandra. And we need someone to unmute and propose a second here.
Brianna Shelby, and I'm moved to second.
Thank you very much. And then if each individual TAC member uses the chat and provides your approval in the chat feature at this time, we'll quickly review. Thank you very much. All right, so here we are, item 4 on the agenda, and we have Dr. Kelly Foster with us today to share some information regarding amendments to 701 KAR 5:100, Site-Based Decision-Making Councils. Well, Dr.
Good
Foster.
morning. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll try to move through this rather quickly. It's pretty non-controversial and gives some relief to schools and SBDMs. I will also share with you at the April KBE board meeting, we will also be repealing another regulation that has the site-based application in it, and we're moving that application into this regulation. So we're trying to reduce the number of regulations out there as well. So just a little FYI on that. But the main thing that I want to talk to you guys about in 701 KAR 5:100, there are 4 big issues that you should be aware of. The first one, as I mentioned, we are reducing the number of regulations around site-based councils by incorporating the content from 701 KAR 5:080 that we're repealing at the April KB board member. Also, the changes in the reg clarifies procedures and creates a timeline for submissions of alternative SBDM model applications. It also sets a standardized effective date for newly approved alternative SBDM models, and it codifies additional requirements to align with the SBDM statute. So those are the 4 big areas. Let's go to slide 1. Okay, so slide 1, we are making sure that a few definitions also align with the statute. So we are ensuring that the parent shall have the same meaning as defined as in KRS 16345, and also making sure that teacher has the same meaning as defined in 16345. Next slide, please. So over the next couple of slides, you will see that some things are in bold and some things are not bolded. The bolded information is the new information in the reg. The non-bolded items are information that have already been in the reg, but we have moved around just to make it flow a little bit better. So I will walk you through the bold items, and some of these I talked about in the summary in the opening, but we're creating a timeline for submissions of alternative model applications, and that timeline would be January 1 through March 1. We're creating a 30-day timeline to the referral of the applications to KBE. It also requires KBE to review those applications 30 days after that timeline, and it establishes the date for the implementation of the new alternative model as July 1. And it clarifies the applications for alternative SBDM models are not required for changes that maintain the statutorily required membership ratios or add non-voting members. The biggest thing that we receive around alternative models is a lot of councils want to add a non-voting student member, or sometimes they want to add a non-voting classified member. Sorry about that. And so in the past, they would have to do an application for that and bring that to the KBE board. And so this will relieve that from councils. If you want to add a non-voting member, a student or a classified person, and you don't change the ratio, then that won't have to come to KBE. Okay, next slide, please. Section 3 of the reg, we have a few more additional items that are in bold, and some of them were also present in Section 2. Once again, the timeline from January to March 1. So if a council wanted to submit something, that would be the timeline that they would need to do that. That the exemptions would be referred to KBE, and they would go into effect July 1. And if there were any exemptions that actually had to come to the board, they would have to reapply for those annually. Next slide, please. Okay, this is not new information in Section 4. We've just moved it around to make it flow a little bit better. Let's go ahead and look at Section 5. Once again, this is not new information. All of this stays the same. Having to provide the names, addresses, and verify the training to KDE by November 1 each year, and requires KDE to maintain that SBDM database. Next slide, please. Okay, and Section 6, the change I mentioned in the beginning is that the application would not be in a different regulation. That application would be incorporated into this regulation. All right, so those are all of the slides that I have, but I'll be glad to take any questions that you might have around the changes to the regulation, and we hope for this to be approved at the April KBE board meeting. This one's a pretty simple one. Everybody likes relief to schools. All right, well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. And TAC members, going back to the guiding question, I know that Dr. Foster did a great job of presenting that information to us. And at this particular time, we may not have questions or immediate thoughts or opinions regarding the revisions, but considering this is the guiding question for this portion of the agenda, you'll have an opportunity with the exit slip to respond to this guiding question. So if additional thoughts or opinions come to mind that you want to type out in that exit slip, I'll make sure to pass those along to Dr. Foster and get that feedback to her and get any answers to questions you may have.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, considering our timing and the fact that Dr. Woods Tucker and Dr. Sweeney, I think, are still at the Student Advisory Council, I'm going to just progress through their slides and move us to item 6, because I do think we have Jennifer Larkins present with us already, and she's going to share some information regarding the spring 2021 state assessment.
Thank you, Stacy. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And I'd like to thank Stacy and, of course, Paul and Jenny also for giving the opportunity for teachers to ask their questions about state testing, because if it's any indication based on emails and phone calls that we're getting in our office, you probably do have some questions about testing this spring. Our guiding question today, as you see, is what questions do you have as you prepare for state testing? I've provided a few slides that we can go over to give us kind of an idea of where we are with assessment and accountability right now, but this might be information that you're already familiar with. So I'm just going to give a general overview and of course ask your questions or ask me to go into more detail if needed. And then we'll devote as much time as we have for the questions that you have and then any feedback that you'd like to offer. So if I'm sure you remember this time last year, we were at the beginning of the pandemic, spring 2020, and at that time we did receive a waiver from state testing. We didn't have to give those K-Prep and some other spring assessments last year. Well, then in September, Secretary DeVos sent a letter to states saying that they should not expect such a waiver for this current school year, that we should prepare to administer tests. So we moved forward with plans and preparations for spring testing, not knowing for sure yet if the Biden administration was going to have a different perspective. But then on February 22nd, the USED did confirm that states would be expected to administer their assessments this year. Now, that wasn't the news that many of us had hoped for, but thankfully we weren't completely surprised by it, and we do feel like we were prepared for that announcement. But with that announcement, and can I ask you to go ahead a couple of slides there to one. There you go, right there. That one's good. Thank you. So the department did say that states could pursue some assessment flexibilities, including offering an extension of the testing windows or administering a shortened version of the test where that was possible. And both of those KDE had already worked and prepared for in anticipation of their decision. But you'll see a couple of flexibilities on here that we aren't currently taking advantage of, such as giving the assessment remotely, which by that we mean that allowing the student to take the assessment from home. We just don't have that option available to us right now in a way that would allow the test to remain valid and so forth. So that's not something we're taking advantage of. And then also, as of today, March 23rd at 10:22, we haven't scheduled or delayed any of our testing into this summer or fall. Now, again, the pandemic, I don't feel like is something that we can say is completely stable yet where we could make a definite call, but as of today, we have not scheduled anything into the summer or fall. Also, in that February 22nd letter, in addition to the assessment flexibilities, you'll see on the next slide that the department provided a waiver template, and they invited states to request a waiver from accountability measures. And that is those state indicators, quality of school climate and safety, assessment results and so forth, that combine to give schools an overall rating, which maybe would be a color, but in the past we've had labels or stars. It's a waiver from that accountability piece. And then also a request to waive the new identification of schools for comprehensive and targeted support and improvement for this year, to waive that, be flexible with that into the future. The waiver template also allows states to request relief from the 95% participation rate that schools are expected to give with students for testing, because, you know, I think they acknowledge, just as we do, that we're not likely to get 95% participation rate this year. And hopefully this accountability waiver and 95% rate waiver, when that's approved, hopefully that will alleviate some of the anxiety that you might feel about testing this spring. That we anticipate no penalty for not meeting the 95% and no accountability. I will note, though, that the template did not offer relief from what they called transparency and public reporting. So although those measures won't factor into an accountability measure for schools, we will still be expected to publicly report in the school report card, student performance. So how students performed with, you know, the percentage of novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, And then also participation rate, the percentage of students who participated in state assessments and participation of students who did not participate in state assessments. And then in both of those areas, participation and performance, the data will need to be disaggregated by student demographic groups. And, you know, we do that, and we're expected to continue to do that. So the US Ed has also said that there are other pieces of the school report card, like chronic absenteeism, that will also have to be publicly reported. So again, state assessments and public reporting in the school report card are not being waived. Participation rate, 95% participation rate, and accountability measures are expected to be waived. Now, if you'll move on to the next slide 5, please. I've included a slide here mostly just for your reference, but I did want to draw your attention to a couple of things. When we talked a couple slide or two ago about the flexibilities that USED is offering, one of those was an extension or adjustment of our test windows. And you'll notice here on the slide that the access testing and the alternate assessment testing windows were both pushed forward into the school year. They normally happen at earlier times in the school year, but they've been delayed, pushed forward. And then also something that is not on the slide, I sent these to Ms. Stacy last week, but since that time, we have released an announcement that our office has worked with ACT to provide a fourth test window cycle that's not shown here on the slide, and that would begin with the standard paper administration on May 5th and have an accommodations paper test window from May 5th through May 11th. So again, that is an additional window to be offered, but that you don't see here on the slide. And then also we've added some really good flexibility to the K-Prep window. As you know, typically schools have to select a 5 consecutive day window within their last 14 instructional days to test all of their students. Well, this year we have lifted that 5 consecutive day requirement and have said that schools may have the flexibility to use any or all of those 14 days to test their students. It doesn't have to be 5 consecutive, and they can have more than 5 if they choose to. And if that itself isn't enough, if a district thinks that 14 days is not going to be enough time to test their students, then we have a process in place in our office where your district assessment coordinator can provide details and let our office know that they need that, and that would be reviewed and worked out with the district assessment coordinator, and those DACs are aware of that process. So as much as possible, we have tried to be flexible. My director, Dr. Stafford, has used the phrase, we're going to be flexible with a capital F this year and just offer every flexibility that we have authority to grant. And hopefully that will also alleviate some of the anxiety that you might feel toward testing. Now, I have just one additional update for you on the next slide, and that is on the tentatively scheduled social studies field test at grades 5, 8, and 11. For those districts that are going to administer the 60-minute field test, it will be given after all of the other operational tests have been given. Now, we have not said that all districts have to participate in that. The way we have approached this is that we have sent out a survey to our district assessment coordinators and just asked them if they would be interested in participating in that survey. So quite a few, I'd say probably around 50% have replied as of the end of last week. Yesterday was the deadline. I don't have the updated information. I'm not the person that's collecting that in our office, but once we get all of that back, we'll have to look to see what interest has been expressed, because we do have to have a good representation across the state of our student demographic groups. We have to make sure that we are including high-performing schools, low-performing schools, and all of that to make sure that again, that we have just good representation of everybody in the field test for it to be something that we can use operationally. So if we don't have interest expressed, there could be the option we might have of just calling some schools and saying, I know you said you weren't interested, but could you possibly rethink that? Or if it should happen that we just can't get enough interest, it might be something that we would have to push forward into the fall, but it would look a little different if we did that. So that basically kind of wraps up the updates. Now, on the next slide, I won't go into detail on the resources that we provide here, but just to let you know that they are available, that I want to make sure that you have access to them, and let you know that we are also working on a frequently asked questions document around assessment and accountability that we are hoping will go out publicly maybe the end of March or 1st of April sometime, that will hopefully answer a lot of your questions in more detail. But if you have any questions now, or if you'd like to offer any feedback, I'd like to use whatever time we do have left to offer that opportunity for you.
Okay, seems we have one person with a hand raised. Miles?
Sure.
Good morning. I was just curious, do you know, have any idea of numbers of students that are just simply missing an action, that they've been, they moved out of state or moved to another home, or have not responded to doing any of the schoolwork, or, they haven't been reporting in to school at all, and, they're just unaccounted for?
Actually, Miles, I don't have that information, but I can go back and do a little research and see if I can get that for you and send that to Stacy to get it to you. I don't have that information.
I was just curious what, I imagine some schools are, have higher numbers than others. Some may only have a few. And, but I know when COVID hit, living situations or family situations might have changed. And, sometimes obviously just even, a few students, obviously they're going to accommodate for testing this year, but I was just curious if they had, had an idea how many that just weren't going to be showing up at all.
Right. And I don't have that information, but I will add that in that survey that we have expressed about the social studies field test, one of our questions was, what percentage of students do you anticipate will be fully virtual during testing windows? And we've had several districts that replied with percentages in 50%, 60%, even 70% that they expected would be attending school virtually. So while it doesn't really answer the question of the MIA students that you asked about, it does we do have somewhat of an idea of what we're expecting as far as how many students will be fully virtual. Until all of the respondents come in, I don't have exact numbers or anything.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Other questions or comments from the group? And we'll just go back to that guiding question. As you're preparing for state testing, what questions do you have?
And Miss Stacy, I'm happy to stay on until the end of the meeting. I'd like to hear the other presenters anyway, and so I'll be happy to answer questions in chat if they come in, or if they'd like to email that email address at the end of our slides with dacinfo@education.ky.gov with any questions. If you think of those later and have questions, we'll be happy to answer those then too.
Great, thank you. And just like with the other presentation, we'll have a specific question on the exit slip regarding this portion of the agenda. And then we have the contact information available. Any other questions before we transition?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to exit this slide deck and update it because we did make a few changes in the opening. So give me just a moment. And I did get a notice that Dr. Sweeney is here. So welcome, Dr. Sweeney. And hopefully you can see the slides. Were you wanting to share your slides, or would you like for me to share on this end?
You're fine. Whatever's most comfortable to you. I do have Dr. Woods Tucker with me, so I'm excited.
Okay, great. He's here as well. Wonderful.
Yes. The first thing that we wanted to do is just get a sense of where our teachers are from. So if you wouldn't mind just letting us know the district you're from and the school that you're at, that'd be awesome.
Yes. So let's go back to.
You can do that in the chat box. You can do that on your
Yeah.
mic, whatever's most comfortable to you. Stacy, I'll tell you what. I'll share my screen for this. Just
Okay.
I think it'll be a little
Perfect.
bit easier.
Yes.
You're like, yes, thank you so much.
And it looks like that we have a lot of people responding there in the chat for us. So.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. So let me take a look at that real quick. Oops. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. So we've got, okay. Hey, Stephanie from Warren. I visit there often. Hello, Lainey. Hey, Beverly. All right. Angie from Peaks Mill. Okay. All right. Hey, John. Hey, Shelby. Hey, Shanda. Kentucky's okay. I've visited there. Love that place. Hey, Kim. Okay. All right. All right, Miles. Thank you. And then Noré, North Callaway. Awesome. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you so much. Let's get going here. So we want to make sure that we are, you all have done so much for our students. You've done so much for our schools, so much for our school community. So first and foremost, thank you for all of the sacrifices that you've made for the last year. I want to take this time to formally introduce Dr. Woods Tucker, who's the Deputy Commissioner and Chief Equity Officer. So Dr. Woods Tucker. He may be with the students right now. Okay, so I'm sure he'll be joining us here shortly. But the guiding question that we wanted to answer was, what work is KDE doing to support schools and districts in their equity efforts? All right, so first off, let's inhale. Just follow that dot and let's hold. And let's exhale. And let's hold. Okay. All right, keep following that dot around. This is called box breathing. It's a way to relieve some stress, and we know that as teachers, you've got a lot of that because, again, you're trying to hold it all together for our people, and you're doing such a good job. So, so keep on doing that inhale and exhale, and make sure that you hold. This is something that our Navy SEALs do to relieve stress as well. So once you get to that hold, it's really nice to have that extra inhale or that extra exhale. Okay. I am a cyclist, so I have this cycling platform that I use, and one of the coaches loves to say, inhale that courage and exhale that doubt. And we are going to get into some pretty deep stuff today, but a topic that obviously we're very passionate about, and we believe needs to be spoken about much more in our schools and our district, and even at our agency. So don't have any doubt about it. Inhale courage. We're gonna have a great conversation this morning. All right. And then finally, please just repeat after me. I am enough, because you really are. You are. And I remember being a teacher, and I remember I used to teach special education at Fairdale High School, and I taught high school English at Louisville Male High School, and I'm still a teacher. I'm an adjunct professor, and there are days where it can just feel like, man, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not achieving what I wanted to, or maybe I'm not reaching every single kid, and that can be a little bit daunting. But you are absolutely enough, and that's something that you need to remember. Okay. All right. The learning targets for this morning, we want teachers to learn about the efforts the Kentucky Department of Education is focusing on to work towards more equitable schools. We also want our teachers to learn about upcoming courageous conversations about race and privilege. All right. Seeing if Dr. Wiz Tucker has made it on yet. Has he made it?
I have.
Oh,
and Dr.
awesome.
Sweeney, you are doing just fine, just as our participants are. So keep doing what you're doing. I may interject from time to time.
Sounds good, sir. But you have to read this quote, because there's no better voice for it. So take a look at this quote, folks, and as you hear Dr. Wiz Tucker reading this out loud, let us know in the chat box what words stick out to you as you hear this.
Before I read the quote, I'll preface my statements by this. I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech, 1963 speech, not only resonated to the millions of Americans then, folks like you, educators, sanitation workers, professionals across the country, and good, decent citizens fighting for the rights of all people, for all of God's children. It resonated then, and it still resonates now. And we still hear that message when we look at the international global movements that are occurring right now. That same message is being really said very loudly. And I do apologize for my allergies, folks. Why now? We've also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to open the doors of opportunity to all of God's children. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood and sisterhood. Again, that powerful message is ringing loudly now as we see genders and various ethnic groups discriminated against. And we need to work hard to lift our nation from these quicksands of racial injustice. And it's going to take all of our sisters and brothers to do so. Dr. Sweeney.
All right. So what words stuck out to you as Dr. Wiz Tucker was reading that quote? And likely now you understand why I was so adamant about him reading it. He does it so powerfully. What words stuck out? I see Brianna said fierce urgency. John said now is the time. What else stuck out to you? All right, Brianna, quicksands of racial injustice. Yes, that always sticks out to me as well. Anything else? Sunlit path of racial justice. Tranquilizing drug of gradualism has always stuck out to me as well. All right, so thank you very much. So Dr. Wiz Tucker, would you like to take this one?
Damien, you're supposed to do the presentation.
Okay. All right, I'm just trying to make sure.
Okay.
I don't want to step on.
I'll quickly do that and turn it over to you. As you all can tell, Damien and I like to have some fun even here in COVID.
Yes.
Kentucky schools should be safe havens where all students and staff, regardless of their race, color, religion, gender, sexual orientation, gender expression, or identity, national origin, or ability, feel safe, respected, and welcome. And some of you may say, wow, Thomas, we get it. You listed all variations, and we should, because I think in order for this country to continue to heal and to grow stronger as the greatest country in the world, we need to ensure that everyone is at the table and that we take time to listen to everyone's story. Your Department of Education wants to support and assist all school entities in their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And we want to ensure and we want to lead the charge for diversity, equity, and inclusion and establish a culture that does not accept any type of achievement gaps or excuses.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard a voice. Anybody have anything? All right, so we have identified 4 priorities in our strategic plan. So we're very focused on equity, achievement, collaboration, and integrity. Collaborating with you, I'm very, very interested to gain a better understanding of what having some of these courageous conversations in the classroom has been like, whether it's been in person or virtual. You know, we've just recently experienced, you know, the deaths of some Asian Americans last week in Atlanta, and so all of those societal events, you know, we believe should be spoken about, right? We have to acknowledge those things because somebody could be hurting, right? And if we don't acknowledge those things, then you know, very much like Dr. Woods Tucker said, we're missing the boat, right? We don't want to inhale that tranquilizing, those tranquilizing sands of gradualism. We want to make sure that we are talking about the things that are happening and addressing those things, right? Our neutrality says a lot. Okay, so it's not that we're asking you to be political by any means, but certainly exploring the feelings that our students have with some of the things that happen, some of the injustices that happen throughout our country, state, and world. We are very fortunate because in July, the Kentucky Board of Education affirmed its commitment to racial equity and racial justice in all schools. All right, and they created this resolution that's actually amazing. So they said that educational leaders must embrace diversity, assure equity, and shape the future of all of Kentucky's children, so that every student in the Commonwealth deserves equitable access to excellent educators who have unique experiences and perspectives, quality preparation, and are committed to the success of all learners. And I want to come back to that in just a second. And then educators, schools, and districts must commit to listening to those seeking to be heard and to ensure young people of color feel valued and safe in school and the community, which goes to the point I just made about what happened recently, what happened, and just so many different things have happened throughout the year, whether it was over the summer with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that happened with George Floyd, whether it was January 6th with what happened in our nation's capital, or again, what happened just last week. Now, if you go back to the second bullet, every student in the Commonwealth deserves equitable access. So this is what I did my dissertation on. And what I found was that many of our African-American students and our Latinx students, and really our traditionally, like our impoverished students, it wasn't only that they weren't getting equitable access to excellent high rigor courses, but sometimes they weren't getting the information. So there were information gaps in terms of gifted and talented programs or advanced placement or dual credit that many of our families were not getting. Okay, so we've got to do a better job at making sure that this information is getting out to everybody and that we don't have roadblocks or barriers like teacher recommendations are the only thing that are going to get you into an AP class, for instance, or you know, you have to have this one class in order to take this other class, or whatever it is. We did this at my last school. We did something called open enroll, and so we open enrolled in those classes, and kids could opt in. Right, so we made sure to remove barriers so that everybody had access to the highest rigor possible in our school. All right, so where are we now? So first off, we have to, so we acknowledge that our teachers, principals, support staff, and superintendents are facing some of the most difficult challenges in the history of education. Much of this is based on the bipartisan politics, racial tension, and uncertainty of new educational policies, right? So we have to start thinking about how do we take care of the social and emotional needs of our students, staff, and administrators during this time? And we've got a few things that we suggest. right? So first off, we've got to ensure that we're utilizing the resources of professional staff. So we've got to use our school counselors, our school psychologists, our school social workers, as well as our community-based partners. Right. So I'm a resource for school counselors at KDE, and we are working hard to build true comprehensive school counseling programs that are preventative versus reactive. Right. So we want our counselors to prevent issues versus react to issues. And most of our school mental health practitioners should be in tier 1 versus tiers 2 and 3. So a lot of times you might think of a school counselor, a school social worker, school psych as somebody that does like individual counseling or small group counseling, which is great. But that whole group counseling is going to make sure that everybody gets the information, right? I want all of our students to feel like their emotions have been normalized in those whole group settings, and then interventions in tiers 2 and 3 for those that need it. All right. We're also working with the Department for Behavioral Health Development and Intellectual Disabilities to educate schools on integrated mental health and asset mapping. So an integrated mental health model means that we're using all of our resources in our schools, right? Whether it's all of our school mental health practitioners, they're forming a team. If we've got people that are coming in from community agencies, they become part of the team, right? Before, we would see those people as helping support students in tiers 2 and 3. But instead, now we can see a partnership and a collaboration in all 3 tiers, tiers 1, 2, and 3. Our mental health people from the community can come in, again, they can talk about the anxiety that our students and staff are experiencing, or the depression, or isolation that they might be experiencing, and they can help normalize that alongside our school-based folks as well. We have to acknowledge that diversity, equity, inclusion, and social emotional learning are all drivers within our curriculum, and they should go hand in hand with teaching and learning, right? So social emotional learning should not just be the job of the school counselor, for instance. It should be the job of all of us. It shouldn't just be the job of the teacher. It should be the job of the teachers, the administrators, the central office folks, right? It's the job of all of us to bring this stuff in. And in terms of inclusion, shouldn't we all have an opportunity to see ourselves represented by the teachers that teach us? Shouldn't we all have an opportunity to see ourselves on the walls of our schools, represented on the walls of our schools, or included in the curriculum that we're learning? So that's what we mean there. And then in terms of building awareness of societal issues that impact our community also impact our schools. Our success in addressing these issues is directly related to our ability to collaborate and work together as a community. So let me help that make sense. So we had 2 superintendents in rural Western Kentucky that came to me this summer, and they said, we need some training for our school administrators and teachers on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They recently had a peaceful protest on one side of the street on a Saturday after what happened with Breonna Taylor. On the other side of the street, there was an angry mob, right? And what these superintendents said next was so profound. They said, it is our job to educate our students so that they can make a better decision when choosing which side of the street they want to be on after they graduate from our schools. So what that is saying to me is that the context of what happens in our society, again, is not separate from that which happens in our school. All right, so we've got a ton of just awesome equity related initiatives that we want to speak to you about. So first off, in terms of our Kentucky academic standards implementation, so we want, as you know, we want all of our graduation requirements to be aligned to the Kentucky academic standards for that subject. And we're working hard to ensure that equitable access to grade level appropriate learning, that there's grade level appropriate learning for all students. We have a partnership with the Council of Chief State School Officers, and we're learning about high quality instructional resources and seeing just how powerfully those resources can move the needle on student achievement. So we're equipping and empowering local schools and evaluating, selecting, and providing access to high quality instructional resources to support all students with engaging, relevant, standards aligned grade level assignments, right? So we want our kids to be able to look at an assignment and engage with that assignment and know that it's going to be high level, okay? Because again, that's going to move the needle on their proficiency, right? We're working hard to provide multi-tiered systems of support, right? And this is a cross-agency project at KDE. So if you think about RTI from a teacher's lens, and then you think about MTSS from a school counselor's lens, right? That can kind of feel a little bit different. So we're working to make sure that everything meshes, that everybody sees exactly what their role is in tier 1, tier 2, and then tier 3. And so that we're all speaking a common language. We've also got this awesome equitable practices and policy scan that Dr. Woods Tucker did as soon as he got to the Kentucky Department of Education, which has been really eye-opening for us. So that helped us. We were seeking feedback from local superintendents, principals, district staff, instructional staff, students, parents, school board members, community members, everybody in our state on equitable practices already in place in our school districts. And so, and we're going to continue to seek input to further this difficult work. But we've got some slides that will show you a little bit about the data that we've received.
And Dr. Sweeney, just briefly here, I want to thank our teachers here who are part of this advisory committee to be one of the first 2 groups to give input. And if by chance, if some of you have not taken the scan or you've not mentioned this at your staff meetings, please ask your colleagues, regardless of whatever role they play in your district, to give us their feedback, to give us the input on this very, very difficult work as we really try to make education for our 650,000 students more equitable. And then the last part here is our last time I mentioned that we were seeking funding for the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching. That's going to be a huge game changer. We did receive over $1 million in funding, which will have 9 different parts. What I really like is the grow your own aspect of it, which we're going to spend $500,000 in which your local school districts are going to partner with teacher preparatory programs, teacher education preparatory programs to create a grow your own pipeline. As we know, a majority of teachers, many of us are teaching in classrooms where within 20 miles of where we grew up. So we found that through research that over 65% of teachers are teaching nearby where they went to high school. And so I'm really excited about the Grow Your Own project. I'm also excited about some other aspects of it, particularly the mentor coaching and the assessment coaching. It's one thing for our folks to go through the teacher education program. It's another for them to graduate. And lastly, Rob Akers, who has done tremendous work for us and on the teacher education side, has worked in his proposal. The proposal has been approved for the Kentucky Department of Education to take part in a consortium, in a grant that's sponsored by the Gates Foundation. And I'm going to screw up the acronym. I think it's the American Association of Colleges of Teacher Education or something like that. So, Stacey, I think I have it halfway right.
You nailed it.
This is there. Wow, I get an A for the day. So this is another game changer that's happening right here. The CATE program and our work with the Gates Foundation in looking at alternative pathways for licensure and passage of these exams are going to be huge. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Woodsucker. All right, so we've got some other, so the list keeps going. So we are speaking to district and school leaders about addressing disproportionality in special education and ensuring access to high rigor courses, the ones that I just mentioned, right? We want to make sure that all students have access to AP classes and International Baccalaureate and Cambridge International and dual credit. We have an unbelievable opportunity in Kentucky for every student in our state to take 10 free high school dual credit courses, free, right? But what the data is telling us is that we still have people that don't have that information. And then we also have people that are, we did a session right before the pandemic hit called Make Every Credit Count. So there's also an information gap in terms of like, what credit do you actually need that will help you when you get to college, okay? Help you achieve the degree that you want. All right, we're speaking to district and school leaders about common obstacles that prevent access. So, you know, I'm talking about dual credit. So Algebra 1 in 8th grade is a huge gatekeeper, right? If kids don't have access to Algebra 1 in 8th grade, then their math trajectory is often Algebra 1, geometry. Some people are still using Algebra 2, and then a potential dual credit senior math class. right? But if they have Algebra 1 in 8th grade, then the trajectory becomes freshman year geometry, sophomore year Algebra 2, dual credit, junior and senior year, right? So just more opportunities, right? We've got to make sure that we get rid of outdated policies, again, like teacher recommendations to get into certain classes, over reliance on test scores, right? So we still, when I was doing my research, we still had high schools that were using a certain test score to say whether or not a 9th grader could be a part of an AP program. So a test score from middle school determined really if that kiddo got to participate in those high rigor courses in high school. Inadequate parent or caregiver input, and most importantly, improving preschool education. In terms of inadequate parent caregiver input, I want to kind of flip a few things for you. I'm reading this book called Beyond the Bake Sale, and it's all about family partnerships and community engagement. What if instead of parent-teacher conferences, those were student-led conferences between parents and caregivers? So instead of you saying, all right, Ms. Jones, this is what's going on with your student, the student came to you and to the parent and said, all right, this is what I perceive is going on with me. These are some things that I'm doing awesome with, and these are some things that I struggle in. And then that creates more of a conversation. Right, so let's have more of those conversations with our caregivers. We're working to engage in our own continuous improvement through professional learning opportunities with national experts here at KDE. So one of the cool things about that is we're not asking our schools and districts to do something that we're not modeling at our agency. Right, we are participating right now in courageous conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we're also investigating how to marshal and reallocate KDE's assets and expertise to ensure every child in the Commonwealth has the resources, awesome teachers like you, interventions, and support they need to be successful in school and life. Okay, we understand that there seems to be some issues with common language, like the understanding of the word diversity, right? Some people see that as very broad. Some people see that as very specific. Same with equity, same with equality. So we want to make sure that we're very clear on that. We are, again, working on those scans and surveys that Dr. Wiz-Tucker spoke about. We're encouraging equity to be embedded in each school district strategic plan. We're creating an equity dashboard. I want to show you what that looks like real quick. Show you here. So this is what it is. So this would be, we want to give schools a quicker glance at different indicators like you see here. Sorry, I've got a diffuser right here. Apology. But we want to be able to, for you to be able to go in, quickly see what's going on with suspension and expulsions with my subgroups. What's going on with promotion and retention with my subgroups? What's going on with ELL? Are our programs equitable? And we strongly believe in asset framing. So looking at the beauty, looking at what is going well for the school, but then also making sure that we're looking at what isn't going the way we want it to. Not as a way of finger pointing and saying that, we're all bad or anything. It's not about that. It's about saying, all right, well, this is where we are. This is what we need to work on because this is where we're heading to make a more equitable school culture, school environment. We're also facilitating professional development opportunities for districts to share what is working and to share ideas to create better outcomes for what may not be working, and then pointing to innovative research. We're also providing, again, access to high quality standards aligned instructional resources. Okay, in terms of, so I just spoke about this, equity, we're trying to clear up language and provide sample language on equity, equality, and inclusivity. And we're trying to answer the question, how do we have courageous conversations, create common ground to create support for all students and broaden the definition of diversity. We're also trying to help schools see how we ensure that students see themselves in the curriculum. Okay. All right. So honestly, a meritocracy does suggest that all students just pull up your bootstraps, but you could actually put those two, you could put A with meritocracy and say a meritocracy, because in America, that has kind of been what our public education system has felt like for the last several years, right? Is everybody just needs to work harder, and if you work harder, then you can achieve the American dream. But what we know is that many of our diverse students and many of our traditionally marginalized or low-income students or students living in trauma, they never got a pair of boots to pull up their bootstraps, okay? And that's because of opportunity gaps, all right? I mentioned earlier, one second, buddy. I've got a student in quarantine. Sorry about that, but we have an opportunity gap issue, right? So again, we talk about how many students that are traditionally marginalized are put in special education versus how many students that are traditionally marginalized put in dual credit. Okay. And then we talk a lot about race-based stress and trauma. So conversations about racial trauma and implicit bias are needed across Kentucky, regardless of the racial makeup in our schools, districts, and communities, because such events impact us all, and we must address their emotional and traumatic consequences. And let's say you're in a school where there isn't very much diversity from your perspective. I just want you to think about the very diverse world that your kids will eventually graduate and walk into once they leave. Once they move on from that school or that school community. All right. So in June, we created this document that we're really proud of called Guidance on How Districts Can Facilitate Conversations About Race-Based Stress and Trauma. And we worked with our trauma and resilience team along with the Kentucky Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. We're working on an equity toolkit as well. And this is going to provide schools and districts with awesome resources like how to utilize a multi-tiered system of support that connects to equity data assessments and scorecards, and just so much guidance, right? Unconscious bias training, research-informed series of cultural competency. Go ahead, Dr. Wistaker.
Yes, I just want to briefly state that these tools will be free of charge. Anyone here, especially our outstanding educators, support staff, and administrators, can access this toolkit free of charge. And we're also putting together an equity playbook. So we're excited about all this work. It's dizzying work, but we're excited about all these resources that we'll be rolling out in the next several months. And Dr. Sweeney, we do certainly appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. Same to you. All right. So it is up to us. It's up to us to examine our privilege and our implicit biases, and you don't have to, this isn't just for our majority educators, right? It's for all of us. But by doing so, educators can reflect on where they are and decide where they want to go. But just a few words of caution. This is going to take a growth mindset, right? A growth mindset says failure is an opportunity to grow. Y'all, I'm so proud because today I did something. I was just presenting to school counselors at the Ohio Valley Education Cooperative, and instead of using like a slide deck, we did a simulation. Right? There is a bit of risk in changing up what you've always known, but that failure is an opportunity to grow is some of the most that is some of the most powerful thinking that an educator can do, because it allows you to take those positive risks that will eventually pay off for your students, your staff, and your caregivers. That growth mindset also says challenges help me to grow. My effort and attitude determine my abilities, and feedback is constructive, and I like to try new things. We can't have this fixed mindset where we say failure is the limit of my abilities, or I'm either good at it or I'm not, or I don't like to be challenged, or when I'm frustrated, I give up. We know that there's frustrations in the classroom, right? We know that there's a lot of that, but we hope and pray that you continue to have that growth mindset. All right, and this is the statewide equity and inclusion scan that Dr. Wistucker said, and made sure he gave you kudos for being some of the first to do this. All right, so here's some of the data. So we see that in a question about whether your school or district currently has an equity and inclusion plan, 55% of respondents said no. And another question asking whether equity is included in your district strategic plan, 33% of respondents said no. And then more than 51% of respondents said equity is included in their district strategic plan. So it seems that our school or districts need more equity and inclusion plans. Our districts need this in their strategic plans, and that and in terms of our district strategic plan, we still need to get many more of our districts on board with that as well. Right? Our stakeholders are telling us that most of our students are white and need exposure to more diversity and assistance with unintentional biases. So you might say to yourself, well, I'm a teacher and I might be in a rural school where there's not much, where most people are white. And I don't know how to bring in that diversity that people are saying that they need. Easy, right? Find different people throughout the community, throughout the state, throughout the country. They can visit you virtually and tell you a little bit about what they do, who they are, what they teach, what makes them them. There are all kinds of innovative ways for you to do that. You can find all kinds of videos on YouTube or so many different platforms for teachers that showcase African American or other minorities as well. People are telling us that they want to see models of best practice, including more than race or ethnicity, right? So we're very focused right now. I told you that I've got that school counselor lens, so we're extremely focused right now on our LGBTQ plus students, right? We're working hard to provide guidance to our schools and school districts on using student preferred names. So, where do our transgender students use the restroom? Just things like that, so that our schools can have models. Provide us with guidance and real resources to help us to make an equitable and rigorous learning environment a reality for our students, and then continue to take feedback on this issue and hold meetings with teachers, staff, and families. And to that point, I want to ask you some questions. What has it been like as a teacher? And I would love for you to use your mic if possible, but what has it been like as a teacher to teach when there has been so much social unrest during this school year, before and during the school year? So what has it been like to bring these topics up in classes with students? What has that felt like?
This year, when I gave lessons, I've been making sure that I have a lot of diversity in my lessons. And so I have gotten yelled at by parents for some of the lessons I've had. So it's been like a very different year. I'm on the racial equity team, so we've been really working to make sure that our lessons are inclusive. But we have faced some pushback from some of the parents.
So as a teacher, I remember getting pushback from parents. Man, it can make you feel small. So how do you rise above that pushback and keep going?
Basically, I just talk to them and explain like why those lessons are important, and I just try to stay calm even when they're escalating, and that's helped the situation. Absolutely. So I don't back down on the lessons because we have talked about them as a racial equity team. So that is something that I'm not going to go backwards on, but I just try to explain my perspective and our school's perspective of why we're having those lessons.
Yeah, and it also sounds like, based on the team that you're on and the plan that you have, that your school supports what you're doing. So you have no, that's further reason for you to stand up for everything that you're doing. So that's great. Thank you for that feedback.
You're welcome.
What else? How else help us understand what it is like, what it has been like to be a teacher during this year? You can also let us know what would you like us to know after hearing about the things that we're doing. What else can we do to support to support you, our heroes? What can we do to support you?
Is there if I interject here?
Yeah, please.
I'm Miles from Jessamine.
Hey.
We opened up in the fall for 6 weeks and then closed and then came open again in January. And of course, as I kind of expected in the fall, everybody was very, very quiet when they came back. And there was, it took a while to really get, conversations going and this and that. And now, the kids, we're all back. A good portion of us are back in person here on a regular schedule. And they're definitely more social. And I think just like with anything, with things that we knew went on in the world and things that they may have experienced, it's going to take, it's still going to take a while for people to talk about their experiences and kids. And I think in the future that it'll be interesting to ask us, young people 5 and 10 years from now, what it was like, to be in school. And I notice a lot of my students they seem to really concentrate. They can really focus on things because a lot of times they were, on virtual and focusing alone. And I'm glad to see that they were very excited to be back with friends. And but I think a lot of their experiences, it's still going to take a long time. Luckily, with art, if we're doing, some drawings, some of that can come out in drawings and other things.
Oh, I didn't realize you were an art teacher.
I am an art teacher.
Yeah,
too.
that's awesome. Yeah.
So, and it was interesting in the fall. We did a lot of art came out very naturally when with drawings of students wearing masks, and actually when we did one of my projects, when they did a self-portrait, they could do one with a mask or without a mask because it had just become a part of it. So I think things that they experienced and things that we they'll tell us. I still think it'll be as they continue to get older, they'll share.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you wouldn't mind me asking you one more question, what are your thoughts on SEL being owned by all of us? And how can we help that become a reality?
I think that, I think just the more people are back in school and there's more just interaction with the community, I just think the conversation itself will be there, and people sharing experiences. I think time is a big thing with all this, and I think time, and I think we're emerging right now, and I think some of your answers are going to open up very soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We want to remind you that it is up to all of us to advance equity and racial justice in our nation's schools. Here's our contact information. If you are just needing some positivity in your life, oh no, sorry, I'm hoping this will, sorry, it's hard to see here. I'll make it a little bit easier. But here is a phone number that you can text. You just text them a smiley face and you'll start to receive a daily positive text message. I'll tell you what yesterday's was, just so you know that it's first off, it's free, and it's just fun to be reminded of positivity. So yesterday's text message was, when life gets really difficult, remember this: you are transforming. Let go, shed the past, welcome the new. Things will only get better from here. So just, if you need a little bit more positivity in your life, there you go. Again, feel free to contact Dr. Wiz Tucker. Feel free to contact myself, follow us on Twitter. We are here for you. And again, we believe that you are our heroes. So thank you for your time today.
Dr. Sweeney, we had 2 questions from some participants. Do you have just a couple more minutes to address those? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. We had a question in the chat, but I'm going to just turn it over to Nora because she's had her hand raised for a little while.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I want her to be able to unmute and share some insights with us, and then we'll address the questions in the chat.
Absolutely.
No problem. I was typing it up in there, but I just, I've changed my question and comments listening to other people, but the last thing you mentioned, I think that's where I'll go. And I'm just going to say that I love that you mentioned schools are safe havens. And I think that no matter what the year is, whether we're in a pandemic or not, social emotional learning has to be a priority for the classroom teacher because they trust their classroom teacher more than anyone else. They build a relationship with you stronger than anyone else. And at North Elementary, we're blessed to have a counseling program in place where students can sign up and be placed and have a counselor here at school with parent permission. But not all schools have that. And we also have a guidance counselor who will push in and do social skills lessons that I personally learn a lot from. She brings books and shares things. There's so much that you can do with the literature Like Miles mentioned masks. We read a book at the beginning of the year about when you wear your mask, you're a superhero. And that made my 6-year-old first graders want to wear their mask and keep everybody safe. But I do think everything mentioned today has to be a priority of the classroom teacher, and we have to find a way to make time for that. Hopefully at the district level down, but if not, then we have to be the ones to lead.
Yeah, I think you've got a great point. There's something called social emotional academic development, Nora. And, one of the things that I used to hear at Seneca when I was a school counselor is like, we can't take away from instructional time. We can't take away from instructional time. But we know that social emotional learning will actually give you time back. So I think that reinforcing that message and modeling for teachers how to weave in that social emotional learning during the classroom. I mean, Nora, what do you teach again? Oh, it's okay. All right. Stephanie, what do you teach? I can go back to
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute.
It's okay.
I am a 5th and 6th grade gifted and talented teacher.
Okay. All right. So what do you have what specific subject?
Okay, so we teach I teach STEM or STEAM.
Oh, okay.
So we do a lot of science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
And you got the arts in there. Awesome.
Yeah, it's a good place to be for sure.
Oh.
But yeah, I think that as has been said, like our teachers have to remember Maslow before Bloom. We have to remember that we have to give our students time and space within our classroom to be able to share their story. A lot of teachers haven't had their students in their classrooms near as much this year as in previous years. So we have to make up time and allowing students to have a voice in their experience, to what they have experienced. A lot of times our youngest learners, their life is pretty much dictated for them. They do what their parents tell them to do. They do what their teachers tell them to do, and they have very little voice. So I feel like it's our responsibility as trusted adults in their lives to make sure that they have time and space to tell their stories, to speak their truth, and to be able to address then some equity issues that they are feeling in their own life.
I think that's just such a powerful statement. So, I mean, within a STEAM program, like there are many things that you're already doing, to create a social emotional learning environment, right? You're likely grouping kids up, you're circling them up, you are providing those spaces to tell stories or share ideas. So a lot of times it's not saying, well, here's this other thing that we want you to do, but it's here are things that you're already doing and let's do more of it. So I think that should also be the message. Oh, and I wanted to say, Stephanie, so one of the things that Stephanie's talking about with having kids bring their stories in, it's called funds of knowledge. Look up that term. It's really cool concept, but basically it's asking kids to don't tell us just like who you are. Like, don't just, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to, you're teaching your class and then maybe you go to the kids' neighborhood or community center to watch them play basketball. You see a whole other kid that you thought you knew when you go to that community center and you get away from the school building. You see that whole other kid. So kids are kind of living these dual lives, right? They're living that life in school, but then they've got this life at home in the community, et cetera. And their funds of knowledge is allowing them to share who they are outside of that school building. All right. My brand new school counselor, Brianna, what's up? I'm excited to have you in the profession.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
Yeah. How can I help? What questions do you have?
Well, I think I do agree with you on the social emotional learning. So my question is, because I just helped with the team, we created some for the beginning of school when we start back in person, and then we're going to start with those. So how, as a school counselor, like moving forward, how do you get the school on board with incorporating it into the curriculum and as an not every day, but like a thing that you do a lot versus just school counselors doing it.
You model it. So, and you make sure that when the teachers, when you're going in to do your school counseling curriculum lesson, that teacher doesn't like think of it as a break and like leave the room.
Okay.
Yeah, you model it. Some of our school counselors are unbelievable teachers because they know that, hey, I might only get once a week or once a month or once every 2 months to be in front of you, and when I'm in front of you, I need to capitalize on that time. So I'm going to find the most engaging way to make sure that you get the material that I'm presenting, and so you model that, but then you can also do those observations. I will tell you, as a school counselor, when I left Seneca after 8 years, these are the things that I heard. I heard from teachers. I still have that Post-it note that you left me your first year, that said, "You're crushing it. Great job. So proud of you." Just like those little things. So I would go in and do observations for 2 reasons. And these were not like formal observations. They were first to get to know my kiddos, but second, because I wanted to create a relationship with that teacher. Right. So I would then be able to see what was going on in that classroom, and I could have conversations with that teacher about it. "Hey, I love what was going on here. Do you think it would be possible to do small groups next time you do this or that?" And those little conversations go a long way because it helps them, first off, know that you're on their side and you're not this scary person coming in to evaluate them, but that you also see the power that they have and the powerful work that they're doing, and you just want to support them, take it to that next level.
Thank you. That's good advice.
Yeah.
Dr. Sweeney, we had 2 TAC members ask some clarifying questions within the chat regarding students and placement test. I think during the presentation there was a reference made to 8th grade algebra, and so a couple of the TAC members were asking about how we should place students in programs like 8th grade algebra if we don't use placement test, and then another teacher was also kind of seconding that that response, was wanting some guidance around that.
How do you normally, how do you do it now? And is it like, if you actually reflect on those practices and policies, I mean, they may be. I'm not saying this with assumptions in my mind, but I'm honestly asking, are they equitable practices and policies? Does everybody have access? Who doesn't? That question, the who doesn't have access, is a big question in my mind. I've been recently looking at a few different elementary schools, and the gaps between subpopulations is something that, when I talk to those schools about their data, sometimes they're like, "Yeah, we had a pretty good idea," but other times they don't realize that those gaps between subpopulations exist. So sometimes it's pointing that out and saying, "All right, so this program is going really well for this subpopulation, but this subpopulation doesn't seem to have access based on the data. So we need to find a way to improve that." Any pushback?
Well, my question originally, mostly what I want to know is what type of unintentional bias might be there, and what can we do to be more deliberate. Now, I understand you say looking at data, that's good, of course, but when we when we have such a small minority population, how do we make sure that the data reflects fairly on the individuals?
Yeah, so I think I probably need to clarify that question, but the first thought that I had was, I talked about information gaps earlier and how many of our families just aren't getting the information. One thing that I've seen a lot, and we were guilty of it at Seneca, is we would try to entice these families to come with Chick-fil-A, come to school at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday and get your Chick-fil-A. And sometimes that worked but but for many of our families, 6 o'clock was work time, right? On a Wednesday, 6 o'clock on a Wednesday was work time. So what we did differently for that was we went to a community center, right? And we offered the same workshop or the same session at multiple times to create more access so that more of our parents could get the information and make more informed choices. So I'm not sure if that's the first approach that I thought of when you asked your question, but I'm not sure that I'm completely answering it.
Well, I can see how important making sure that your message gets out and reaches everybody, being more deliberate in that. So thank you.
Yeah, being intentional. Honestly, so there's also something called abolitionist teachers, and it's a great program because it asks you to start asking your administrators different questions. And again, nothing that I'm saying to you is about finger pointing or anything, but it's honestly to start opening eyes. What are we doing for this? How are we looking at that? There's something also called data walks, data equity walks. And this would be the number one thing that I would suggest that all of our schools do. It is basically, that huge chart paper that you all have when we're back in person, but go around and put different data points. Some data points that you like, some data points that you're not too excited about, but put each data point on a different piece of chart paper and then ask different stakeholders to come in and look at the data. But don't just ask them to look at the data, also offer them Post-it notes and ask them to write possible solutions, right? So I want you to do this. I want our administrators to do this with their teachers, but I also want them to do this with their parents and caregivers, and then I want them to do this with their students. It's again, being intentional about what's really happening, giving everybody a peek behind the curtains, and then looking for solutions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Stacy, thank you again for the opportunity to speak with the teachers. You all are my heart. I miss teaching. That's why I'm a professor right now, is because I miss teaching so much. So I value you. I appreciate you. I know Dr. Wiz Tucker feels the same way. So we look forward to future conversations and seeing what other ideas that you have that we may be able to move forward on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sweeney, for being here today. And I will kind of give a heads up to the teachers. I've already asked him to tentatively put down our June date because there are a lot of other exciting pieces of work that Dr. Sweeney's leading that I think that you would find most valuable to hear. So with that perfect timing, I see Dr. Glass has joined us right at 11:30 is what our goal was. Dr. Glass, welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Hi, can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes,
Great.
we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Well, great to see everyone. I was just with the Student Advisory Council, and they were having a great discussion about the legislature that went on. They could have kept going all day. They had a lot of opinions, and I thought maybe that's what we could talk about too, because I'm sure you have some opinions and thoughts on the legislative process. But just as an update. Have you had a chance, Stacy, to process through any legislative matters yet?
We have not.
You have not. Okay. Well, I'll give everybody just a brief update on some high priority items that we're paying attention to. One, of course, is the budget. We're seeing what's put forth a flat budget for next year. That's disappointing. It's different than what was in the governor's initial proposal, which called for an increase to education funding and specific increase for teachers and staff to have a raise. So I know that's frustrating, but we continue to advocate for education and education funding. But so far, right now, what we're seeing is a flat funded education budget. On policy matters, some of the things that we've been tracking, one of them is House Bill 178 that relates to the makeup of the State Board of Education. We have seen over the past few years the State Board be turned into sort of a political instrument from Governor Bevin to Governor Beshear. And there's an effort in House Bill 178 to remove that and make it more balanced from a partisan standpoint and geographically and demographically. So we were supportive of that legislation because we think it gets back to the intent that Kara had with the state board, which was sort of make education nonpartisan or at least bipartisan. So it does make those changes. What happened with it is that it included all of the current members of the state board rolling through their terms, and then as they came off, they had to be replaced by what this representative mixture of party and geography and demographics. As the bill moved to the Senate removed the teacher member on the board and removed the student member on the board. And their arguments were that the teacher would be a sort of extension or tool of the governor and be a political agent on the board, and that the student would be sort of wouldn't be developmentally able to participate in the conversations and also could be sort of used as a pawn for political interests. We disagreed with those assessments from the department standpoint. We value having the teacher perspective at the board as we're making policy decisions, and certainly our students and our student representative right now has been really impressive young woman, and having that perspective and voice at the table when we're making decisions is important as well. So when it went back to the House after some advocacy from teachers and students around the state, the House refused to concur with the Senate version, and they went through lots of discussions and ended up putting this teacher and the student back on. So we're really pleased with where that bill is right now. It hasn't been passed by both chambers, but we expect it to be. And if it moves forward, we do are asking that the governor sign that bill. So I think it's good legislation. Shifting gears, another bill that you may be hearing about or paying attention to is Senate Bill 128, which is sort of the extra year of eligibility bill. And so it says that any student or a district can create a process by which any student can go back and repeat the year, this past year that they missed. And it adds an extra year of athletic eligibility. So a fifth year for students that are participating this year. Certainly the intent of this is to sort of allow students to make up if they felt like they missed out on experiences they'd like to have. And so we recognize that it comes from a place of good intentions. There are just a slew of technical problems that we'll have to think through. How does this work from GPA to class ranks to graduations to how does the eligibility work? To what conditions or restrictions can districts put on students who choose to do this, or can they do that? So we've got a lot to think through. Then there are questions about how it impacts graduation rates. How do you count these students? So lots of complicated steps that we'll have to figure out. That really there are no good answers for. We'll just have to make tough choices among our options. And then just another piece of legislation that we're paying a lot of attention to and talking a lot about is House Bill 563, which is the omnibus education choice bill. It contains two main provisions, one of which opens up inter-district school choice to parents in absence of an agreement between any district. So right now, districts have to have, they negotiate and come to an agreement or not about, can you cross district lines? This would eliminate those. And the language in it says that sort of the receiving district cannot discriminate against non-district students in accepting them. So we are, let me back up. I am supportive of the concept of public school choice. I am concerned that the language that's in this bill is really underdeveloped and not completely thought through. This is going to cause funding concerns that may have constitutional implications that will end up tossing this legislation into court challenges. We've got concerns around how districts might or might not limit what students they allow in or recruit some students and who they might push out. So there are significant concerns around what happens for kids that are learning English or who have disabilities, and are they pushed out of districts and not accepted into others. So equity concerns around the choice aspects on it. And we think the language is constructed in a way that it actually advantages out of district students. So if you got a limited space in your current building that you'd like to make available first to students who live in your community, the language doesn't recognize that. It says you have to treat the out-of-district students the same. So we could have a situation where out-of-district students are placed in a building with limited space, and the students that are in the district are not allowed to have those seats. So these are things that we could probably clear up if we had more time. But the bill was moved in committee on the 25th day of a 30-day session, so we didn't have a lot of opportunity for input or changes to it. So that's really the main concern, is that it's just being rushed through, and it's got the public school choice side has some predictable problems that it's going to create that could be avoided. Shifting to the other half of that bill, the private school and tuition tax credit side. How this works is an individual or a corporation makes a donation to what's called an account granting organization. Account granting organization files with the Department of Revenue, then they can start accepting these donations. If you give your donation to this account granting organization, you get a tax credit in Kentucky. So let's say you give $10,000 to one of these. Well, that means you're waived out of $10,000 in taxes in Kentucky. And then on top of that, you still get the federal tax deduction for the contribution to a nonprofit. So you actually can make money on your tax deductions. It's a profit-making scheme. If you have a bunch of money or a corporation, you can actually make money on your tax deduction. So we're concerned about that. That's one element of it. The funds go to these account granting organizations, and then they can turn around and distribute them to any number of education service providers, including private schools in 8 communities in our state, on the behalf of students in Kentucky. So what's not clear is, how do students and families get access to these funds? What's the process? How are they vetted? Where do the funds go? What's the quality assurance with these education service providers? What standards are they held to account for? Do they have? How do they ensure that they have background checks? How do we ensure that we have equity, that these education service providers or private schools are not excluding students because of gender status, religious beliefs, disability, any other sort of thing. The bill is just silent on all that. We don't know any of that or how that's going to work, or if it will. And it is income limited, so it's intended to target families who make under about $110,000 a year. So they talk about it being targeted toward lower income families. I think it's probably a middle income and below targeted, but it's not clear that the funds would be going to largely low-income families. And what we've seen in other states that have these systems is that low-income families, for a number of reasons, have challenges accessing these funds. So we're concerned about that. Again, not if from my professional perspective, if private schools in the state and private providers in the state want to help us educate low-income students with disabilities, let's do that. But let's really level the playing field, and all the regulations and all the things that you have to do, and the access and non-discrimination that you have to apply as providing public services with public dollars need to also extend to these other entities that wish to do that as well. So that's all wrapped up in that same bill that's being pushed through late in the session. So some concerns, significant concerns about that. We have asked the governor to veto that bill. And again, not that I'm an ideologue that's opposed to school choice or saying that we should pursue school choice. I think there are upsides and downsides of it. This is just this could just be improved a lot if we were more thoughtful in the way that it was going through. So those are some of the, I think, the high level legislative items that we're tracking and paying attention to right now. I'll stop there. I've been talking for about 9 minutes now, so that's probably more than anybody can process through at one time. So I want to stop and just have a discussion with you about your perspectives on any of that, thoughts you might have, feedback that you have, just anything that you want to tell me. So they don't necessarily have to be questions. I can shut up and hear your perspective, which I think is the purpose of the group, to advise me. So I'll do that now. somebody has to have an opinion about these. Come on. I mean, my family is made up of teachers, and they have opinions. So, so I invite anybody just to share their thoughts on any of the items that I've talked about: the budget, the extra eligibility year, the 5th year, the tax credit, public school choice, or any other elements that you want to talk about. Or we could also talk a little bit about federal money, additional federal money coming in, and if there are questions or people wonder about that or how it might be structured. So any of that. Otherwise, we'll cut everybody loose to lunch a little early if there's no discussion.
Commissioner, I did put a appreciation comment in the chat, but I will say I personally reached out to my House rep and my senator, and they told me before any of the votes happened how they supported public school and public school teachers having that raise since Kara, and I mean it was a very positive interaction with both of them, and both of them voted yes on the bill that we want vetoed. And just, I don't know, I mean, year 15 and every year that the budget seems to get, when you see items at zero, like professional development and transportation and kindergarten not fully funded in areas like that, it's really disheartening as a teacher. And I choose to try to share that positively, but very real on social media. And I appreciate you sharing communication in a professional way that you do, because I noticed right away that a statement. But I think that no matter what happens, I will probably retire from the classroom as a teacher because I love it that much. But it's really disheartening as a teacher when year after year after year, I was never political at all. I've always voted and kept it private, but I was never political at all until I became a teacher in the classroom and just sat on the site base for many years and just watched how we have those conversations about hire the teacher or buy new textbooks. And at our school, we always choose people because we need those people. But we have reading textbooks now that really should be replaced. And I think everybody's in that same boat. And I think in Kentucky, we do amazing jobs. And I think in my district, we do amazing jobs about making magic happen. But does it really have to be that difficult? I don't know how we as a group can organize together and make a change. But I think communicating with your legislators and telling them your real story. And I did that. And after the vote, I said, why? After our conversation, did you still vote yes? And I got a very good response as to why and what she understood she was voting for. And then I replied back with what I said, I want to be your ally, even though we disagree on this, but I would love you to come to my classroom or come to my library or come to school on Monday and look around and see how many kids are hungry, because I do believe the numbers moved from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 during this pandemic of kids who don't know where the next meal coming from. And I don't know, I think the more we share our personal stories and the more we have those conversations with legislators, I think eventually it has to make a difference. I don't know, maybe that's too positive, but thank you.
Thank you, Nora. What district do you work in?
I'm in Callaway County.
Callaway.
So
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you reaching out to your legislator and letting them know your perspective. Nora, are you a parent too?
I am. I've graduated 3. There, 2 are finishing up college. One just started at Murray State in the education program. I have a junior and I have a kindergartner. So I'm going to be a parent in the Kentucky school systems for a while, and I always start with that before I go into. And I stressed funding kindergarten full day, which did not make it into that. It's still not funded after everything that's done at this moment. I would hope that that changes by the end, but it hasn't. And preschool's underfunded and all the other things, because all of my kids, the last one, by the grace of God, it feels like because of some social issues, because he's 5 and his brothers and sisters are teenagers, that was the only way he got into preschool. And I try to share all those personal stories as a parent and as a teacher, because I do think they need to hear how it affects one family. And I know not most people pay for college and have a kindergartner. That's just my unique story. But it gives them a good look of what a typical family might be struggling with. And that's the reason why I join your council, or I come to the table, because Western Kentucky is a little bit different than Louisville and some of the bigger places that they're looking at for school choice. But I'm totally against that for my own personal reasons, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I do think telling your personal story does sit with them and open up conversations.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that we've been advising folks to do is when they reach out, to do it as a parent and to tell the stories of how public education and the public community school system has supported your family and your students, and what it means to you, and why it's important that we build up our public school system. We support our public school system. We help improve our public school system, instead of these efforts to sort of defund it and dismantle it that I think we're seeing happen. Thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts? And thank you, Nora, for sharing all that. We're grateful. Okay, well, it's a quiet group. I think, Stacy, maybe you wore them down, or maybe COVID has worn them down, or maybe teaching has worn them down. There's a list, right? Nora's sounds like 6 students or something, 6 children, maybe wore her down. But a lot of things. Oh, it looks like we have one more from Miles. Miles, go right ahead.
I just want to say thanks for going through everything with with what they're trying to come up with and the laws and everything in Frankfurt. I spent just many years doing art advocacy, and knowing that if you don't dot an I on something, or you change a word in a sentence, can change a whole program. And so I know it's a lot to go through, but I do appreciate that you were trying to get representation still, with the teacher and the student. All that's really important. And but like I said, I learned early on, even a teeny tiny detail can have a giant impact on really all the students and around the whole.
Yeah, absolutely. We pay a lot of attention to, is the word shall in things, or is the word may in things. So that's a one word change that makes a heck of a lot of difference when it comes to legislation. Yeah, thanks for the perspective, and for your advocacy for education in the arts as well. Okay. Well, Stacy, sounds like that. Appreciate those couple that have been able to share out, and appreciate all of you for the work that you do. Keep up. Stay strong. We got a little bit more to go this school year, but the end is in sight. Summer's coming, and you'll get a breath, get a chance to reset. Hopefully, your districts have started creating some summer learning opportunities for your kids. I know some of you will be working in that. It's a chance at some additional income, but I know that you're tired too. So be thinking about some ways that you can reset, take some time for yourselves, for your families, because we really need you, and the kids need you, and we appreciate you. So I know you don't hear it enough, but please hear it from me. Thank you. All right, y'all have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. All right, so I'm going to share the slide deck once again, as we've got just a few concluding elements of our agenda that we need to review. Okay, so here we are at item 7. Just got some general announcements that we wanted to review. The commissioner is hosting a virtual tour. It's a talking tour where he's getting feedback from a variety of different participants, parents, teachers, students. It's a stakeholders type environment, and you can register for the virtual tour by using this link here. There's a multitude of dates, so feel free to register for one of those dates and share this date, or share this link with your colleagues, so that everyone has the opportunity to register and provide some feedback. Also, I've got a live link here that allows you to access the TAC application. We are going to, in just a couple of minutes here, acknowledge several participants who are going to be rotating off because their term has expired, and just wanted to make sure that as TAC members yourself, that you share this application with others who may be interested, who may be some ideal candidates to be part of this committee. So that live link is there, and that's actually going to take you to KDE's website. On our TAC page, you'll be able to locate that application. The 2021-2022 TAC meeting dates have been set. So if you want to go ahead and just jot those down, put them on the calendar. We've got September 21st, December 14th, March 15th, and June 14th. So those are our meeting dates that have been established. And of course, I'll follow up with calendar invites for these. We do want to give some recognition to those TAC members who are rotating off. And you can see here, we've got a pretty lengthy list. Thank you for your service to Stephanie Beeson from Warren County, Miles Johnson from Jessamine County, Lainey Neal, Montgomery County, Nora Ramsey, Callaway County, Garris Stroud, Hopkins County, Carrie Walters, Wayne County, and John Whipple from Breckenridge County. So I know that 3 years is a pretty lengthy time, especially whenever we were meeting face to face, where you had to drive to Frankfurt and give up a full day of your time to this particular work. But just want you to know that we are most appreciative and recognize that the time and energies that you put forth will continue and carry on, because your voice has been monumental representing teachers in the state of Kentucky. So thank you very much. Now, as we come to item 9 on the agenda, we are going to need a motion to adjourn, but I want to emphasize here that we've had a date change for our June meeting. Please make sure that you notate that the June 2021 meeting date is going to be June 17th, and that is a date change, so please make sure you notate that on your calendar. And we have access here. It's a live link to our exit slip. If as we've made our way today through the various parts of the agenda, if you have specific feedback, follow-up questions, requiring additional information about a topic, please make sure that you include that in this exit slip. We've got space allocated for that. So I'll make sure to follow up with anybody that I need to based on what you respond on this exit slip. All right, so with that, if I could get someone to unmute and make a motion to adjourn, and then a second, just like we did with our approval of the summary minutes, and then in the chat, just everyone respond that they approve. So looking for a first, make a motion.
This is Nora Ramsey, Callaway County, final motion to adjourn.
Oh,
thank you
you,
very
Nora.
much. We saw
We're
3
gonna miss you.
commissioners. We saw 3 commissioners on our council, and I am very honored to work for Commissioner Glass. I have high hopes for the future with him. So it is a motion to adjourn, but thank you.
Thank you, Nora. And how about a second?
This is Brianna Shelby, a second.
Thank you very much. And then in the chat, I'm seeing people already comment. So thank you very much. And we are going to adjourn here at 11:57. We'll give you a couple of minutes here, ending a little early. But thank you very much for your attendance today. And I will be following up with the summary minutes, and you can access the recording on the KDE page, and I'll follow up with that link. Have a great day.